So in this presentation, I'm just going to give a quick overview of some of the things that you need to think about when you're writing for publication and just kind of help you orient to how writing for publication looks different than writing in a classroom. And then the other slides go into further detail in some of the stuff that I bring up here. So one of the points that I like to make is that anything that I'm talking about is a complex skill set that takes practice and trial and error and the humility to admit that you need to learn something more in order to, really, get to that point where you have something that's worth offering to a publication. And, I think that, in my experience over the last 6 years, it's worth it. You don't just get, kind of the CV or resume line of publish such and such, right? Like you really develop your critical thinking abilities and your ability to kind of navigate this like complex professional sphere that we're all operating in. So the intangible benefits that you get from developing these skills are well worth it. Okay, so I wanted to start with just a map of all the different skills that kind of are part of writing. In our minds and our culture, we tend to just have writing and editing, and we don't really have a very thorough understanding of all the different components and sub-skills that are a part of those two. Just having a map like this can help you evaluate your own strengths and weaknesses, right? So what of these skills do you have down? What of these skills do you need to work on? What of these skills have you never even heard of and that you might be interested in seeing if you can develop? And then the other thing that I like about this is that it shows that you have to do some repetition, right? Like you're not just moving through this in a linear process. You maybe don't always know how many times you're going to go through that circle before you're ready to get to editing. And that's just part of the process. Everyone has to do it. And it's worth it because that's how you get to something that's worth publishing. And then the other thing that I like to highlight about this is that this can help you get feedback on your writing or your process, right? So instead of just handing your paper to someone and saying, is this good? You can target specific components of the paper and get their feedback on this, and get their feedback. And the other thing, so they have sequencing, ideas, and organization. And I think you kind of don't know how to sequence your ideas or organize your ideas unless you understand your audience. So if you're going to hand this to someone or evaluate this on your own for sequencing and organization, you need to have an understanding of who your audience is to know what that should look like. Because sequencing, just like a speech or, a genre of music, right? Like it depends on who you're presenting it to, what the most effective sequence or organization is going to be. Okay, so if you're going to take one thing away from this presentation, it would be this, like pick your venue early. The writing style in the classroom looks very different than writing for a magazine or journal. And every magazine or journal has a different writing style. They have different ideas about what makes a good introduction. They have different ideas about what makes a good so what, or they have different ideas about what counts as good research or counts as a good conclusion. So these are the things that you kind of want to understand about your venue so that you can write to that. You also want to study them for who their audience is and kind of what the range of arguments has been on your topic, so that way you know that you have something to offer, right? Like if a venue has published like 12 articles on toxic leadership in the last year and you want to write about toxic leadership, that might not be where you want to go. They might decide that they're saturated with articles on that topic, so you might want to find somewhere else. Or you might want to see, all these articles have talked about this, about toxic leadership, but mine really has this to offer. So if I just do a quick couple sentences, like the 12 articles on toxic leadership that, such and such journal has published in the last year talk about this, but I'm going to talk about this, right? So then you've kind of subtly within your paper kind of pitched why your idea matters to them. So doing the research on your publication is essential. So in this presentation, I've kind of highlighted the 4 things that you want to research, and I go into detail on some of these in the other presentations. I think it really helps to start with the mission statement. You get a really good sense of the personality and values of the venue. And it's something that you don't want to just skim. You want to kind of take a second to digest, right? You can get an understanding of personality from the grammar, word choice, etc. So if you just take a second and sit with it, you'll start to kind of gain that intuitive understanding of who that publication is. You know, they put a lot of time and effort and care into crafting that. And then the other thing that you really want to study is the audience. That's another presentation. And as I was mentioning earlier, you want to study their style, make sure yours is mirroring theirs. It can be really, disheartening, you know, to get 2/3 of the way through something that you've written and then find a venue you want to publish it in and realize that you basically have to rewrite it because it's not in the right style. And then you also want to make sure you thoroughly understand the submission requirements. It's just a sign of respect. Okay. And then the last thing that I want to highlight is that thinking of publishing as participating in an ongoing conversation. You know, so when we're in the classroom, we're taught to write as a means of demonstrating content mastery, right? Like you're writing in order to show that you can understand something to your teacher. But when you're publishing, you're speaking to a diverse range of people who are professionals who've probably thought about this, you know, who have a wide range of opinions, beliefs, and understandings about whatever it is that you want to write on. So you need to understand that you are joining a conversation. And from what I understand, it takes about 3 to 5 years to really feel like you have some expertise in that conversation, which just means you have to start, and means that you have to have the dedication and humility to learn how to listen, right? To learn how to listen to how the conversation works, right? Like, you know, we all kind of have an intuitive understanding of how, you know, face-to-face conversation works or text conversation works, right? You know, conversation through this kind of laborious, lengthy, you know, sophisticated process of publication, it also has its own kind of rules and nuances that if you take the time to kind of study and ascertain and then, you know, incorporate into your own work, you're going to be more successful at publishing. You're going to have a more sophisticated, nuanced understanding of the topic, of how people think, you know, like taking the time to really step back and, you know, understand how people think differently about a topic. It just makes you a more effective person on so many levels. So beginning to treat writing for publication as participating in a conversation, and kind of orienting towards it as that, right? Like you're speaking to other humans rather than you're writing this thing so you can get published, is going to make you more effective.